Welcome back to the Adonai Gameplay Animation Workshop class overview. Today we looked at heads-up display and how we can add that to our playable character, what a heads-up display is and how we create it. So first of all, let's open up our character blueprint. Okay. So last time we left off after doing our timelines. So today, instead of using the print string that was using our max block speed to show, we are going to start displaying it on an actual heads-up display. So the way you create a heads-up display or a UI all the way, then you gotta right click on the content browser and then go to user interface. Most of the things that you can ever create on Unreal are going to be available through these, and then you want to click Widget Blueprint. Once you create a widget blueprint, it's going to look something like this, but it's just going to be completely empty. So there's a lot of things that you can do in here. So if you see on the left side kind of how you have components on your playable character where you can add components, you can add these icons and items from your palette onto your widget. All of these have different uses. Most commonly you're going to be using something like a text or an image. So text is something that you would want to just normally display on the screen while the player is running around. You can also have it be fancy, change different kinds of fonts, etc., color it and whatnot. Okay, so this is what our first text block was. We just drag and dropped in a text and then we increase the size and we change the text over here. So there's a difference if you rename your text over here. This is the item name. So that is to differentiate between what the actual text is and what the actual item name is. Okay, so once you've created something like that, it's just a simple text. So let me hide everything else for now. Get rid of that too. Okay, you can also align it based on positions and anchors. Once you set an anchor, then you can reset the position and location based on it. Let's go back to the playable character to see how we can make this appear on our character. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have an event begin play. This node basically sends out an execute signal as soon as the player is possessed, so as soon as the events start beginning to play. Okay, and then what we search for after that is called create widget. So it says construct none here, but as soon as you select a widget here, it's going to change that. So we created the heads up display widget, HUD widget. So that's what we created. And then it needs a player controller, which is the only player. So this is something we previously used on our world level blueprint, where we were using it to possess our character. Basically, this is a reference to what the player is using to control. So a reference to the actual player, not a character or anything else. Okay, and then we add it to Viewport. So add to Viewport is basically the function that tells Unreal that you want to add the screen on the game itself. We've also gone ahead and promoted this to a variable. What that does is when you promote it to a variable, you can set the value for it. This is going to come in handy later when you want to use it. We also looked a little bit in arrays, but we're going to get more into that in a future class. Right now, let's just get this to work. So this is our creating heads-up display widget. So this is what adds it to the screen. So when you click play, then it's gonna appear right there. Okay. Alright, then the next thing we learned inside heads-up display widgets is creating is toggling visibility between things. So here we learned about custom events. The first thing we learned is whenever you have any of these things selected, you need to make sure this is a variable function is turned on. If it's not, then that is not going to appear on the event graph. So it's important you remember this variable is turned on. So for instance, you see this health, it doesn't have this variable turned on, right? So you don't see that health here. The player health is a different variable. Okay, but here the speed, this is considered a variable, right? So that's the name here. Okay, so here we're using a function called set visibility. It makes it so like it's either visible, hidden, or collapsed. So basically to hide text or to show text. We've attached it to a flip-flop. We learned about flip-flops earlier. Basically, whenever the execute signal goes once, it will go into the first frame. The next time the execute signal goes, then it goes to the next one, and then it keeps alternating between them. So now we learned about custom events. So let me go ahead and create a custom event real quick. So this is a custom event. So whenever you create a custom event, it comes with two sides. So there is the event itself, which sends out the execute signal, and then there is a call function, which would be the call function right here. This is basically what activates this event. So anytime something runs into here, so you can attach this to any other blueprint, every time something runs through here, this event automatically gets played. So the way we have it set up is like we created this custom event, named it toggle speed and time, and then we went to our character blueprint, and then we just used toggle speed and time, and we attached it to an input key tab. So you could just search for input key and then tab, and then that's the one that we used. Okay, and here we are using the HUD reference, what we set up as our variable before. We're going to plug that in here. We can break link from that one. So basically wherever we're using this, it's just a reference to the HUD widget. That's what it's coming back from. So every time we press tab, it's going to send out a signal here, which is going to send a signal here, and that's going to alternate between the two. Okay, the next thing we looked at after that was to add text to, or movable text or changeable text or something to our code. And the way you do that is by whenever you are at a selected palette item, you can go on the content of it, and then you go here and then you create a binding. What binding does, it allows you to make sure you have code attached to that place. So if we go to this binding, which we named at display speed from player char, every time you create a binding, it automatically creates a function on the event graph. So here's the function, right? So if I double click it, then it will open it. And once you initially open this, it comes out like this. So it only has a return node. What this return node holds is the value it can return. So you see this is a text value. So what it's trying to do is any text that appears here is also the same text that's going to appear in here. This is the text container, right? So here we have done some math for our heads-up display. So we created a speed heads-up display variable. You just do that by clicking plus on the variable and then making a float variable, just like old times, right? So I'm gonna get rid of that variable because we don't need it. And then what I did is since this is a float variable and we are trying to get our speed in terms of integers, I converted it into a 62-bit integer, then I converted that into a 32-bit integer, and then that converted into a string. And then we're using append like before. Append is just so that you can attach two strings or more to make text. So you can like add more text after it, before it, make it little changes, etc. I'm gonna remove that pen. And then we just directly plug it into the return value and it automatically converts it. Okay, so what this has done is that this will start displaying the value 0. What we need to do is now we need to set this value up. So the way we set that value up is by going back to our player character right after our sprinting code. Here we had the previous one where it was going to a print string, but instead this time we drag out a HUD reference, get it, and then search for speed. if you look for, since context sensitivity is turned on, you can see like it's trying to get either the HUD widget speed, which refers to this variable right here, which refers to the entire thing, so that changes the visibility, yes and no, to on and off. And but we don't want that speed, we want the speed heads up display, which is the variable. So we can either get it, which means it will call the value, or we can set it. So set is going to set the value. So what we did was just use the max walk speed from the character movement, we plugged that in, and then we attached it to our sprint timelines, which is this entire part right here. So every time our character starts sprinting now, it's going to change the speed from 750 all the way to 1500. And then as soon as I stop, then it will start slowing down, and then you can see the number on the bottom. Okay, and if I press tab, then it will alternate between the two, because that's how we had the visibility set up. Now we come to the next part, which is the health bar. So where health bar, we used a progress bar. A progress bar is something that can be filled and unfilled based on the percentage of progress on this meter. You can set the background and the foreground colors of it, or even add images to it if you want, something like abilities. You can also do it from fill from center. So some games like to do a little clock for their abilities, things like that. So all the things is you can do it from here. You can also make your progress bar vertical if you wish. So that basically makes it a vertical bar. Okay. So how do we control it? We create another binding for it. So you just go ahead and create a binding. We created player health indicate. So we go to player health indicator. So we just have a variable made of another float variable. We made sure the default value is 100 because that's what our player health value is. Right now it's at 100 because we have hard coded it into the heads up display itself. Later on, once you have character stats, then you can also set it on your player character, and then that will also reflect here. Okay, so since it's at 100 and the percentage only takes a value between 0 and 1, as you can see, right, this is a percentage with 0 and 1. The health bar goes up and down based on 0 and 1. So 100 divided by 100 is going to give us the actual value. And then we've created a little code here to make the player take damage. Basically, if you press X, which is the input key, it gets the player health from the HUD reference, similar to what we did for the speed heads up display here. And then it subtract 50 from it, and then it makes the player health that. So it's getting the value, which is 100 initially, then subtracting 50, and then setting that as the value. And then if I have a branch here, an if-else condition, if the player's health goes less than 1, basically whenever it's 0, it's going to play the death animation with this function block. So what that does is whenever we play, if we press X, then it takes damage. If we press X again, it takes more damage, and then our player character dies. So later on, you're gonna attach this code into, instead of an input value, to like a AI/shitbox area thing. We're gonna look into that later. Another thing that you probably saw was the text was also changing. That's because we have this display health as a binding as well. So let's just go and look at it. Yeah, so we've just made it so the player health is getting rounded down into an integer from a 64-bit to a 32-bit to text, and then we are appending it with a string, so health, then the player health, and then out of 100, and then we're returning that as a string value. So that is what we learned in terms of heads-up display and how we can attach it to a player character and how it works. The main takeaway is you need to remember to have a HUD reference, and you need to remember how you use the event graph inside your heads-up display. So it works similar to other blueprints. It's just you need to be careful when you use custom events. And that's going to be it.